Wild freak up room, North Sea biting, never bites. Fast water swimming in the girls down in the guys. Spin nine seat, black leaf, right, fight. OMG, Mac 4, Robin C, Gallon Neck Night. Hot stove talk, Robin C, bringing the hype. EC's alive, plus toss some of those in my city life. Right. Queens top the dreams, united. On the rag, Trump out, bring me stack. Night and under that chocolate flag. Smack that home out the park, fuck a deafening black. Side game time, Robin CP, time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remains cheer, in the orange we unite. Match forever, I'm 50 in sight. Match bright and high, energy like a live wire. Queen City chance, passion never tires. Grand slam dreams and paces focus fast. Holding it steady, cause we know we gonna last. We the kings of the field, time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remain cheer, in the orange we unite. Match forever, I'm 50 in sight. All hearts ignite like NYC stars. Robin CP, guiding even do scars. Queens got the glow, city anthem flows.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to a very special Mets Midnight Talk right here on the channels and on X. Yes, it is very late. Yes, we're trying to not wake up the neighborhood and our own household, but you guys wanted a midnight edition show, and we made sure we brought it to you in a very special show tonight. It's kind of a Mets hot stove. It's kind of a Mets talk show. It's kind of everything in between, but again, you guys wanted it, and we're going to provide it. So we're going to do it here right now on Midnight Talk with my boy Chris and with you guys in the chat. Chris, how you doing, buddy?
Oh, I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. I'm trying not to wake the whole neighborhood up right now. We got a lot to talk about, though, in relation to Pete Alonso, in relation to Alex Bregman, in relation to everything that we've been seeing around the league. Teoscar Hernandez, it's going to be a good show. Definitely unique for us 100% on the channel. We don't go live usually this late, but you know what? We got to do it. The people asked for it, and we got to do it. So salute to everybody in the chat, whether you're watching over on X or over on YouTube. If you're in Rob's live chat, if you're in my live chat, spam the thumbs up for us, and let's have a good conversation, because the Mets are in a position where, you know, they could take multiple different routes, but one thing remains clear, and this fan base understands that, is that there's an opportunity to make this team a perennial contender, and that's what we need to do. So that starts right now, quite frankly.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, very interesting to think about, you know, how this offseason started. And obviously it was the Juan Soto sweepstakes. The Mets did win that. And obviously they have a lot of roster spots they had to fill throughout the offseason. They filled a couple of spots in the rotation, haven't really messed with the bullpen much at all. Besides Soto, not much all position player wise. And, you know, people are getting frustrated. We understand that, right? We still don't realize. I mean, we're kind of starting to realize what they're trying to do with the rotation, considering the fact that Corbin Burns is now off the board and is now an Arizona Diamondback. You know, what are the Mets doing with this rotation? Are they done? Are they going after a trade target? Are they still in whatever free agent targets there still is available? And that's what we're going to get to on this show. But today we found out that the Mets did offer Teoscar Hernandez a 2-year deal prior to him signing the 3 years deal with the Dodgers. And that kind of put like a light bulb in my head, but like, you know, you would think the outfield's kind of set, you know, with Nimmo, with Siri Taylor, and obviously Soto. Why are they going after Teoscar Hernandez? Is it a platoon outfield situation in the corners? Is it just plain DH? And, you know, try to go after Teoscar Hernandez when it kind of seemed like he was probably kind of close of coming to the Mets until the Dodgers maybe gave that extra year the Mets were uncomfortable with. What are your thoughts, Chris, on the Teoscar Hernandez situation? I mean, I don't think anybody thought – nobody knew that the Mets were involved, right? People were talking about it like, hey, the Mets should be involved. But what is your thoughts on them being this far in on Teoscar Hernandez, possibly give him a 2-year deal, and it was very likely he could have been a New York Met.
I'm not shocked per se because we've both, we've spoken on Teoscar Hernandez and how the Mets should be in on his market. Everything that we've heard was between the Dodgers and the Red Sox leading up to this moment, when he signed this 3 year, $66 million deal. And it kind of also just sparked a light bulb in my head in that maybe they don't want Starling Marte on this team in 2025. That's really the only thing that I can think of because, where else would you put Starling Marte in that equation if this Teoscar Hernandez signing went through, right? We know it was a 2-year deal. They didn't give him the extra third year that the Dodgers did. And it really seemed like Teoscar Hernandez was destined to return to the Dodgers from the start. But it also just seemed like his camp was just feeling out any other offers that were on the table from other teams, which, like any great agent, and even the players, if they're controlling the negotiations themselves, they're going to do. But it always seemed like he was going to return to the Dodgers. But I like to at least know, right? I like to hear that the Mets were in on him until the very last possible minute when he went back to the Dodgers. But again, like, were they going to deploy a platoon left field and get Nimmo off of his feet for a little bit and have him be the lefty DH? Because we know Jesse Winker is still out there. I just made a video about Winker on my channel yesterday, and I posted that yesterday because we're all wondering, is Winker going to be that platoon DH alongside Starling Marte? Again, we've also heard a couple weeks ago, probably about 2 weeks ago, that the Mets are looking to move Starling Marte if they find the right deal. They'll probably eat some money on that deal, but to create and free up that roster spot, that is something that they are willing to do. Now, again, the Starling Marte trade market is a little bit slim. I don't really know many teams that are going to be truly in on him if there isn't a prospect attached. But at the very minimum, being in on Teoscar Hernandez allows me to think that the Mets are not comfortable with the offensive weapons they have at the DH spot as currently constructed. And that's something that the Mets are going to continue to look after. And a lot of people want to talk about Anthony Santander. I think it's very clear, right? 2 years was their max point for Teoscar Hernandez. They could have won 3. If they really wanted to, they could have won 3. But they're not looking to add bats that are 3-4 years, right? After Juan Soto, the market for the bats outside of Alonso and Bregman, we're talking about DH strictly here, as a platoon or a straight up DH, is going to be anywhere from a 1-year to a 2-year deal. This is why I wanted Jock Peterson, because that deal that Jock Peterson signed with the Texas Rangers was so perfect, and I wish it was with the Mets. And the Mets were also in on Jock Peterson before he went to Texas too. Let's not forget that. So I always thought that it was going to be a long shot to sign Teoscar Hernandez. I'm happy that they were in on him, but it signifies to me, at least at the very minimum, that they are not comfortable with Starling Marte being definitely not an everyday player, but maybe not even a platoon DH in 2025.
Yeah, and I'm still trying to figure out with the Teoscar narrative. Is it mostly for the DH, or is it something else that we don't really know when it comes to the outfield, right? We heard a report. Well, I heard a report today. Most might have seen it about Brandon Nimmo still not doing baseball activity, hasn't been running yet. I wonder if the Mets are concerned about Brandon Nimmo, and that's why they went after Teoscar Hernandez, because that story was also put out there all of a sudden in that same time frame where apparently the Mets gave a 2-year deal to Teoscar Hernandez. And I do wonder if they're starting to be worried about Brandon Nimmo being healthy or could actually start the season, because I mean, I know it's nearly the new year, but if he's not running yet, and who knows if the running is going to cause anything with his plantar fasciitis, I'm wondering if they're really concerned about that. And this is why we're going to lead into our second topic here. I think Anthony Santander is more in play. I think this is similar to a Bellinger, a Bregman situation with Alonso. I think the fact that they were in on Teoscar Hernandez, they were probably saying, all right, maybe we can, why is it taking so long with the Dodgers and Teoscar? Let's see if we can get him on a 2-year deal. Maybe he'll come elsewhere. Obviously it was probably going to be the Dodgers all along, but they went after him. And I do wonder if this is leading more towards, is Nimmo going to be ready? Is there a concern in the Mets organization that Nimmo is a problem? Because you don't go out there and get Juan Soto and then go after Teoscar Hernandez when everybody believed that your outfield was basically set for the season. I mean, everybody believed that, besides center field still being quote unquote up in the air, it's either Siri or Tyron Taylor. It was Nimmo on left and Juan Soto in right. And the outfield was set. We were talking about third base, second base, first base. That's what we were talking about this offseason. And I do wonder if Santander is more on the Mets radar and you're going to start hearing rumblings like we started to hear rumblings with Bregman all of a sudden when things starting to look a little, I wouldn't say fishy when it comes to Pete Alonso, but start going in other routes just in case Pete Alonso does not sign with the New York Mets. And I'm just thinking now, like, damn, Nimmo could be more injured than we actually know, and that foot could be a real problem. On December 29th, we find out that Nimmo hasn't even been running yet. He's been doing some activity, but not running as of yet. And that's, worrisome. A month and a half away, pitchers and catchers report. So it's not that far away. And can he ramp it up? Can he be, ready to go on opening day in left field and be in this lineup? Because Nimmo is a big part of this lineup. So I do wonder if the Hernandez interest and obviously offer, which we didn't hear nothing about. Great job by the reporters. Once again, the Mets find a way of, signing, be on the verge of signing somebody or be in on somebody that is one of the better bats in this offseason. I do wonder, Chris, with the Teoscar news and now with Santander still out there, we had no idea the Mets were involved with Teoscar Hernandez. And we had to find out after he signed with the Dodgers that the reporters finally do their jobs. And again, nothing leaked out. And it's frustrating because, like, you would think somebody would know something, and nothing's getting leaked out at all when it comes to the New York Mets. And we didn't hear nothing with Burns, by the way, just to bring that up out of nowhere. The Mets never seemed like they weren't involved with Corbin Burns for whatever reason. I thought that was a very fair deal he got with the Arizona Diamondbacks. And
Steal.
Who knew? He wanted to go home in Arizona where he lives right now. So, sorry, I went off track there. But do you think that Santander? I know you kind of hit on it a little bit, but do you think Santander, with the thought process I brought up, is he in play now, considering the fact that the Nimmo situation and the Mets went after Teoscar Hernandez? Do you just think that Teoscar Hernandez was just a random, let's see if we can get him and we put him at the DH spot because they were in on Jock Peterson as well?
It's really hard to say. It's really hard to say. I want to say it's a one-off, just adding capable bats and premier bats into the lineup and just seeing what works in that rotation. Again, if you sign Teoscar Hernandez, you can not only utilize him at the DH spot, but also in left field to get Brandon Nimmo, if he's dealing with any residual effects of the plantar, fasciitis, then you can get him off his feet for a little bit. And that would be also your DH platoon as well as your left field platoon. I don't know if Santander fits that equation, right? Because, maybe Santander takes a short-term deal, but he's also a guy that could be making however much money AAV, but also upwards of a 4 or 5 year deal, given where he's at in his career. Now, Teoscar Hernandez, again, he's been a guy that's been he took a 1-year deal. He just now took a 3-year deal, right? And Santander could follow that same route. I don't know if there's any incentive for him to do so. But again, when I take a look at Santander, it just seems like, first of all, he played 129 games in right field. He didn't appear in any games in left field for the Orioles. So that would beg the question for me, do you move Juan Soto to left field at that point if you go and make the move for Santander? I'm under the impression, Rob, that as soon as the Mets got word that they were out on Teoscar Hernandez and that he was going back to the Dodgers, they are shifting their focus to shorter term deals, right? Guys that are going to be in the 1 or 2 year deal kind of market. A guy like Jesse Winker. I see in the chat someone saying guy like Kike Hernandez, right? Those types of guys
Nice
that
move.
are out there. And I really do think that Kike Hernandez is kind of up the realm of what the Mets are looking for at this moment. If they pivoted and if they're still looking for that guy, right? That it could be a replacement for Starling Marte. It could just be another addition just to add him into the rotation of guys that they already have. I think that Kike Hernandez on a short-term deal fits that mold. And I would still try to pursue a trade for Starling Marte at that point because I would still want Jesse Winker back on this team. I think that no matter how you chop it up at this point, obviously things change if the Mets go after Anthony Santander. I just don't think it's likely. If you stick with Marte, you're going to have a platoon at DH. If you go after a guy like Hernandez, you're going to have a platoon at DH, right? That's a given. Who's going to be that lefty bat? Well, really the only lefty bat on the market still outside of Santander is Jesse Winker. You can talk about Jurickson Profar as well. I would love Jurickson Profar. Last time Jurickson Profar hit free agency, I was a big proponent, especially in what he did to the Mets in 2022 and that wild card series where he was just knocking the cover off the baseball. I wanted Jurickson Profar very badly. I think he went to Colorado, he struggled, and the Padres brought him back and he took off again. He's probably going to be in line for a 3-year deal. He's going to want a multi-year deal, right? He's going to want 3 years because he was an all-star. He hit 280 with 20 plus home runs. He's a switch hitter as well, I believe. So I think the Mets are out on Profar as much as I would like to explore that market. And also Santander. Again, two guys that I would be happy to take on this team. I just don't think the Mets want to invest that much money and that many years in a situation where you have to platoon that DH spot. Now, again, get a guy that can be an everyday DH like Santander and just trade Starling Marte and boom, problem solved. I just don't know if the Mets are thinking that way, unfortunately. And that's the thing. It's kind of tough to gauge, right? What the Mets are thinking. Because if they were really after premier guys like a Profar or Santander, they would have just went the extra third year for Hernandez. Even if they didn't get him, they would have at least put that on the table for him to see if they could entice him away from the Dodgers. But them just stopping at 2 years for him really opens my eyeballs in terms of what the actual market that they are interested in for these guys is. And that's a 1 or 2 year deal. So I don't know, man. Situationally, the years on the contract that he's going to make, I genuinely don't see Anthony Santander being in a Mets uniform.
I think he's only going to get 4 years, though. I think if he was going to get 5 or 6, I think it would have been a little bit more, I guess, media hype towards Anthony Santander, and it hasn't been. And the way these deals have been going about, besides the Soto deal, I mean, there's been a lot of 3-4 year deals, 1 year deals with Gleyber Torres. The position players aren't getting the years that they're getting except for Juan Soto. And, we see the situation with Pete Alonso. Teoscar Hernandez got 3 years, which is kind of in the realm where you think he would get. I'm assuming Hernandez was probably looking for a 3-4 year deal. But it was clear that the Dodgers probably were at 2 years as well. And the third year probably got it done for whatever reason.
Yep.
I'm still trying to focus in because Anthony Santander fits what the Mets love, and that's versatility, right? Jock Peterson is mostly a DH, but can play the outfield, right? We know Pete Alonso is a first baseman / DH, if you want to put it that way. Anthony Santander is a guy that can play first base, that can DH, that can play, right field mostly, but can play left field as well if need be. And I think that versatility matters to David Stearns and the New York Mets. I mean, look at the guys they picked up. Winker can play the outfield positions, can play DH. Iglesias can play all over the infield, second, third, and short. Everybody that they had in this team that Stearns brought in that wasn't already on this team had versatility in their repertoire. And I think that's something that the guys that they've been going after, Jock Peterson, Teoscar Hernandez, I'm thinking they're going to go after Anthony Santander. I don't know if they're going to get him. Maybe you'll find out they made an offer, not an aggressive offer, but an offer nonetheless, and hopefully he takes it because he's going to a team that, is going to be a contender in 2025. That's what I think the Mets are hoping for here. And now I would like to go another route and be more aggressive and, get Bregman and Alonzo and kind of solve the problems right there.
Yeah.
But, we keep on hearing these rumors that Pete Alonso offered declined to 3 years, $90 million, still looking for that $200 million. If he's that much dead set fast on $200 million, and there's two teams that apparently are in on the Met on Alonso, and that's the Blue Jays. Why the Blue Jays? I don't know, but they said the Blue Jays. They said that I don't think that's true, but the Giants, the Mariners, the teams that we all been hearing of. We know the Giants are willing to spend money, but nobody wants to go there, right? Adames went there, great, but nobody else. Burns turned down going back to his home state, where he grew up, where he went to college and all that stuff, to go to Arizona. And a factor was the state tax was another thing that was a big concern with Burns and why he went to Arizona, because his family he lives there with his family. I'm starting to think that Boris is really in the head of Pete Alonso, even though Pete Alonso hired him. I mean, you hire him, what do you expect? So I feel it very hard to believe the New York Mets are going to sign Pete Alonso on a short-term deal. He already declined 2 offers from the New York Mets last year with the 7 for $155, and this year, or this time around, with 3 years, $90 million. The Mets, I said from the beginning, they're not going back to that offer that he declined during last season. During 2023 offseason. That is not. And
there's no reason to. There's no reason to.
100%. Unless he takes the short-term deal that they offer him with the opt-outs, 3 years, $90 million.
Yeah.
They're not going more than that. And they would be okay if it's Santander and, a stopgap first baseman, or, they can go Bregman and Anthony Santander if they wanted to. And it's probably similar money for the most part. If you're going to pay Pete Alonso 6-7 years, why not get a guy like Anthony Santander, who's more versatile, and Bregman, who is, a third baseman, or put Vientos to first base if you really wanted to do that, get Bregman and work your way around it that way, because there is no scenario, in my opinion, that Pete Alonso is going to get 5+ years from the New York Mets. I think 4 is probably the max, and I don't even know if the Mets are going to go there. I think the Mets are calling his bluff. I think all these rumors that the Giants want him, the Mariners want him, the Mariners still can't do it until they shed that payroll. Until they shed the payroll, they can't add that money. Maybe it seems like the Cubs can't find their wallet. I don't know if they're going to spend that type of money. If teams haven't even been that involved with Pete Alonso, this is Boris and Heyman, which is interesting that Heyman was the only one that brought that up in multiple articles, in multiple podcasts that Heyman has gone on. He keeps on saying, oh yeah, the Giants, oh this team, oh that team. Every time when it seems like there's nobody else involved, teams are starting to come up only from Heyman's mouth. So I think the Mets are calling Pete Alonso's bluff, saying, hey, here's your offer, take it. We're going to do what we need to do, because clearly they're pivoting. They're going to Teoscar Hernandez. They're going to Jock Peterson. They might be on Anthony Santander. Maybe they're really going to sign Bregman at some point as it got quiet. But because all this is quiet, and I think for the first time, the New York Mets strategically leaked that 3 years, $90 million strategically, because this doesn't seem like a Boris move to leak that. That seemed like a Met leak. Because why would they leak that? Because of the fact to put pressure on Pete Alonso, in my opinion, Chris.
The Mets are playing this absolutely perfectly. The
100%.
Mets are playing this perfectly. The only other team that is able right now to give Pete Alonso that money is the San Francisco Giants. Now that they struck out on Corbin Burns. You take a look at the payrolls of the Giants. They're about $45 million under that $201 million that they had last season as their payroll after arbitration, after pre-arbitration, etc. They're at like 157 right now. And they still got other holes to fill, right? And Pete Alonso takes up what, 28, 29 million of that. And you're talking about a problem for the San Francisco Giants moving forward. So I mean, again, they could just be desperate and just offer him that money and boom, there it goes. But I think the Mets know exactly what the situation is. And I think that as we've been saying, as you've been saying, right, they are calling his bluff because he knows, the Mets know, and Boris knows that the situation for him as a ball player, right? The best situation for him is to come back to the New York Mets.
Yeah.
And the Mets are saying it's going to be on our terms, not yours. And it's awesome. The Mariners would be an awesome fit for him too. But the thing is that they're already $5 million under what they were at last year for the payroll. So again, they'd have to shed that Luis Castillo money, presumably, if that's the guy they choose to trade. That frees up around $24 million to allocate that money, the rest of their money, for a Pete Alonso contract. And the Blue Jays, come on, there's no way they're going to sign Pete Alonso without trading Vladimir Guerrero, right? I mean, there's no way they're going to have those two guys in the same lineup and risk Vlad walking next offseason. So they're going to have to be pretty confident. I mean, a lot of suitors would be in on a Vladimir Guerrero Jr. market if they decide to take calls on him, obviously. But I don't think that a Pete signing would happen before that type of trade happens. Although I could be wrong. Maybe they go vice versa and they just bring him into the doors. I don't know. Again, but Toronto has the same issue the Giants do in terms of bringing players into their organization from the geographic standpoint. I think that we've been very sort of adamant about that across the board, and other reporters and just other media outlets have been saying the same thing. So again, I'll say it again. It sort of just seems like destiny that the Mets and Alonso work this out. It's just who's going to come to the middle and how is this like line going to shift, because there's two opposite ends of the spectrum right now. They have to come into the middle, but one party is going to be like, no, you got to come a little bit on our side, and then the other part is like, no, you got to come a little bit on our side. So who's going to be the first one to crack? There's a lot of different scenarios though. You can get creative. That's the thing here if you're the New York Mets, is that you can get creative with this type of contract too, with the opt-outs in particular, right? You can offer a 5-year deal with opt-outs after, let's say, a year 1 or a year 2, something like that, or year 3 to get him back onto the market if he so chooses before he hits 33 years. You can do that, right? But it just seems like the Mets playing hardball, and I kind of like it, to be honest. Pete Alonso, we all know he passed up the offer last offseason. He bet on himself and he struck out. I'm going to stick to what I've been saying on my channel and in our streams, that the best thing for Pete Alonso to do is to bet on himself again. If he truly doesn't like, or just wait for the San Francisco Giants to become desperate and just kind of wait this market out, that's the second route. But if he really wants to maximize his career earnings, you take that prove-it-year deal. You take that 3-year deal and then just opt out after the first year to get back right onto the market. But it just seems like there's this stubbornness, and whether that's coming from Alonso or Boris is a whole different conversation, because honestly, at this point, Rob, I know we talk about Boris, but how much of this is Alonso? We heard he wants to be a Met, right? He wants to be a Met. He would love to be a lifelong Met. Well, let's see it. Let's see it. The deal is on the table. The deal's on the table, Pete. I mean, seriously, at this point, I understand he's homegrown. I understand he has a large fan base within this Mets community. I get it. They're doing everything they can and playing it smart. But the deal's on the table, Pete, and it's a pretty fair offer after you had a down regular season in 2024. Yeah, you showed us something in the playoffs. You've been actually pretty good in the playoffs in your career, the 2 times that you've got there. We understand that. But we need more from you. We need more clutch production. We need more production with runners in scoring position. We need you to be that premier middle of the line of bat outside of just 34 home runs, 40 home runs, however many home runs you put out of the ballpark. So again, I like Pete Alonso a lot, and I really do wish that he remains a New York Met. But at the end of the day, David Stearns, as president of baseball operations, the type of deals that he gives out, and just the overall workings. This is not Billy Epler running this organization, right? This is not, let's spend Steve Cohen's money recklessly outside of a guy like Juan Soto, where you need to get him into the doors, right? This is, we want you here because you've been part of this run that we've had, and we want you to continue being here, but you're going to do it under our terms. So
Yeah.
I think that a lot of Mets fans are still stuck in this sort of mindset that, Pete Alonso has to be a New York Met. He's given his heart and soul to this organization for the last, 5 or 6 years, and that the Mets need to give him whatever he wants. That's just simply not how it works, unfortunately, for Pete Alonso, at least.
No, and it's very clear David Stearns don't like Pete Alonso as a player. And I think that whole, thing where Pete Alonso continues to talk to the media and, during the season, oh, I always want to be a Met. I do want to be a Met, but yet your actions are telling you something completely different. You turned down 2 offers now over the last year and a half, where you could have been a New York Met, as you said, you want to be here. 2 fair offers, in my opinion. These aren't like low ball offers. That 3 for $90, he's not getting $30 million AAV anywhere else. And if the team's gonna match the Mets deal and he goes elsewhere, that just shows you never wanted to be a Met. And I'm sick and tired of everybody believe that he keeps on saying that. Do you believe that? I have not believed that for a year now, since he's been talking about it. I never believed that. I told you the first big offer he's going to get from somebody else, he is out that door quicker than you can even open that door for him. He'll open it himself and just run the hell out of there. And I meant it. I felt that way, and I still feel that way. The only way he's going to be a New York Met if Pete Alonso accepts the terms that the Mets offer. That is it. They're not budging here. And if that means they got to pivot to Bregman and Santander, or Bregman and moving Vientos over to first, or get Bregman, put Vientos at DH and get a stopgap first baseman, they're going to do it because they know they got the Vladimir Guerrero situation in their back pocket. Yeah, they're going to have to fight for him because other teams are going to be in on him. And it might not be during this 2025 season where he can be impactful here. They have that in their back pocket. We know the Mets can go above and beyond for the player they want. They did it with Yamamoto. We know that situation, what happened with that. They did it with Juan Soto. They got that guy. You know what that tells everybody now? If Steve Cohen wants a guy, he won't be outbid. And the fact that people are talking about the New York Yankees going after Vladimir Guerrero Jr., I'd be shocked
He's not going
if he
there.
ends up to the New York Yankees, right? He made that very, very clear since they said it a couple of years ago. He doesn't want to be a New York Yankee. He hates them. He wants to beat them. And I know people are like, oh, if they give him the most money, yeah, but we already know that's not going to happen. They're already spending a lot of money. There's not a lot of money coming off the payroll next year for the New York Yankees. They're going to pay him close to $40+ million, $35 to $40 million. Find that very hard to believe. But when it comes to this situation with Pete Alonso, there is the fact that he turned down 2 offers should open up everybody's eyes for Pete Alonso. He does not really want to be a New York Met. Yeah, if you give me $200 million, sure. You get the best of both worlds. I get paid, buku bucks, and I'm a Met. So I kind of did tell the truth, but I also got really, really paid. And Pete Alonso doesn't deserve $200 million. I'm sorry. He just doesn't. He is not the player he was in 2019 or 2022 for that matter. And even that was declining years compared to that. His average has been increasingly going down. The runners in scoring position, the clutch performances in a lot of the years have not been to what other players are, even though the power might not be there with other players. There's still guys there that hit 32, 33 home runs and still knock in 90 to 95 RBIs. And it's still more productive than what Pete Alonso does. Pete Alonso can hit 45 home runs, but in those 45 home runs, how many were actually meaningful? And then people are like, well, they're all meaningful. No. I went over it with his home runs last year. He had 36 home runs last year. It was 6 home runs that were meaningful, that were impactful in clutch moments, in big moments. So what was the other 30 home runs? Garbage time. That's the problem. And that has been throughout his career, except for 2019. That has been a huge issue. You made a video about it, Chris. It's a huge issue. The Mets know it, and there's a reason why teams are shying away from Pete Alonso around baseball. This is not just a Mets problem. This is a Pete Alonso problem around the league.
So I will say, on the flip side of things, from Pete Alonso's perspective, of course, you're always going to want to maximize your money. I mean, it would not be the right thing to do to just say, "Oh, I have 100% loyalty to one team. Let me just, not look elsewhere for more money elsewhere." So, like, I would like to be fair to Pete Alonso in that respect, right? Um, I don't know. For me, I don't know. And if I'm cutting out, you let me know. Again,
You're good right now.
I'm good. Okay. Um, I don't know if it's the Mets and teams around the league not believing in Pete Alonso right now so much as it is they don't believe in him on a 5 or 6 year deal. You know what I mean? They don't know how he's going to age. Pete Alonso right now, maybe 2 or 3 years from now, okay, serviceable bat. But how is he going to age in years 5, 4, 5, or 6 in a potential long-term deal? And I think that's where teams were shying away. And I really do think that he's going to sign a short-term deal, whether it's with the Mets or somebody else. I don't think any team around this league, right? If there's any indication on how quickly the previous teams that needed first baseman pivoted elsewhere to short-term options like the Nationals and the Yankees, right? Instead of even just batting an eye at Pete Alonso. I think that's a very big indication as to the reality that Pete Alonso is going to have to accept here. Because even the Giants, I mean, again, the Giants, I don't think that like they could be in on Pete Alonso. That is probably the one team that I will say right now is the biggest threat to take Pete Alonso away from the New York Mets. But I don't even think they are going to give him a long-term deal. They'll give him the AAV, just like the Mets will. They won't give him the long-term deal. And so it's about the back end of that contract and not committing to those years 4, 5, and 6 for Pete Alonso. Um, I'm going to be honest, Rob. I think that it's a total mistake. If indeed the Mets, and I think that we've heard reports saying that they offered him that 3-year deal for $90 million. If there was an opt-out for Pete Alonso, a player option after year 1 in that deal, I think it was a grave mistake for him to turn that down. That is
Yeah.
the best deal that he is probably going to get. And again, the Giants could become desperate at a certain point in this offseason, but 3 years, $30 million a year, you get a chance if you perform well in the regular season to opt out and try it all again to get a long-term deal next season. That is the best deal that Pete Alonso is going to see this offseason.
Yeah. And that's the issue. And you know what? It would be a cherry on top just for my thoughts and opinions about Pete Alonso if he takes a similar deal to go elsewhere. And because why turn that down? Like let's say that, like, I think this is more, Boris trying to get another team involved, even if it's fake news or if it's true, but they're not really that interested in even going to what the Mets are giving him right now. And he does go elsewhere. Him not signing now just doesn't make any sense, except that I think he felt like the organization betrayed him, in my opinion. And people are like, what are you talking about? Well, let's see. Lindor became the de facto captain, the leader of the team, along with Nimmo, by the way. But when Pete Alonso got hurt, Lindor had a team meeting, right? And it was with Alonso. That was a story. And when Pete Alonso tried to, rally the troops later in the year, and Lindor was out, it kind of didn't get the traction that the Lindor meeting got. And I do wonder if Pete Alonso kind of feels like I'm not the guy here anymore. And I think that kind of irks Pete Alonso a little bit. I think Pete Alonso likes to be the guy. He likes to be, the people everybody where everybody can turn to and be like, hey, that's how good player, great player in Pete Alonso. I wonder if that annoys him a little bit, that Lindor was traded here. It was Pete Alonso's team. Let's not make no mistake about it. It was Pete Alonso's team. Lindor comes in here with his flair, with his gloves, with his hair, with, the overall talent that's better, and just takes over a team in a couple of years when Pete Alonso was the guy. I wonder if that's more of an issue than people are leading on. There was talk that Pete Alonso was part of that toxic environment a couple of years ago, right? We all forget about that, but that was a talk. And we know McNeil and Alonso were good friends, and it was always those two guys were the issue. That was the kind of the thought process around the clubhouse. I wonder if that's more of a factor than we're actually bringing up. I'm not even bringing that. I'm only bringing that up just to bring up another opinion out there, another fact that might be the reason why the Mets are not going all in to bring back Pete Alonso, who is their homegrown guy. I wonder if that has something to do with it, Chris. I know that's outside the box, but chemistry was a huge deal last year, and it did seem like Pete Alonso was, until the playoffs, it seems like he was kind of the somewhat outsider, right? It was more of the Latin players that were kind of, with all that stuff going on, and they were, it was Iglesias, Lindor, Marte, it just seemed like a weird, shift in culture. And it seemed like Pete Alonso was kind of left out a little bit, even though he was enjoying himself because they were winning, but it just seemed like he was the outsider in all of this.
I can't confirm or deny that thought. There have been some rumblings that point to what you're saying. Again, nothing confirmed. I can't, like, there's no confirmed sources around that thought, and I can't speak on it factually because we're not there. We don't know what's going on in the clubhouse, but I have heard some rumblings through the grapevines of that potentially being the case, that there is something there that just is not the gelling with them. But again, I don't like to speak on that kind of stuff because, again, we don't know anything. We're not there. We're not present for how these guys interact with each other in the clubhouse, off the field. We all know the Mets in 2024, especially during that run, seemed like a very tight-knit group. And it did seem like Pete Alonso was a part of that, right? I don't know, man. I again, it's a tricky situation to talk about that potentially being the case in these contract negotiations. But at this point, with the Mets trying to foster this, organization to be very tight knit in a close unit, it could make sense. It could make sense. So I can't support or deny. All I'll say is that there have been a few rumblings of that potentially being the case. Again, could be unrelated to these contract negotiations and why they haven't come to an agreement just yet. But again, I don't know. I don't know. I can't. I hear where you're coming from, though. I will say that, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and I only brought up that part of it because over the last couple of seasons, it seemed more and more. There was reports. It just seemed like the vibes are off when it comes to Pete Alonso and other players in that locker room, where the shift was leading towards the leader of Lindor. And I don't know, remember, Pete Alonso was always the guy when everybody was loving him and Pete Alonso could do no wrong. It was very easy for him. But as soon as the fan base turned against him and other players were taking over the lead role in Nimmo and Lindor, it's not shocking that Pete Alonso's stats have taken a downwards trend ever since basically that. And I do wonder if he's also pissed. I'm going to bring another thing up, that the Mets paid Lindor. They paid Brandon Nimmo. You know what I'm saying? And those are guys that, Alonso has played with over the last couple of seasons. And he's like, yeah, hey, what about me? And, again.
Well, they tried to. They tried to.
That's my point. And that's exactly where I was going to get to. If you really want to be a Met and turning down two offers is the bigger problem here. They did not offer you fair deal. They did not offer you, bad deals here. Both of these are very good deals, where those would have been really good deals for both the team and the player, and you turned them down. So I don't think he wants to be a New York Met. Is your feelings hurt because of the dynamic of the team and how people kind of flock to Lindor and Nimmo and not you? Well, too bad. I know you're tougher than that, Pete, right? If you're not, then I don't want you to be anyway, right? We've done a lot of losing with you as well, right? And the notion that we can't win without Alonzo is just dumb Met fans can't get over the fact that, oh my God, he's a homegrown guy. He's going to hit the most home runs in franchise history. If that's all you care about, great. Then in 10 years, when we don't win a World Series and Pete Alonso has, he beats all the offensive category stats, and you retire his number, you can go to that retirement ceremony and enjoy yourself. Because I care about the ring and who provides that for me and for us, right? David Wright is getting his number retired this year, right? As good as he was, he never brought a championship. He was actually part of a team and basically a span where they lost in 06, right? Not really his fault, but 07, 08, guess what? Guess who was a part of that team? Guess who was the leaders of those teams? They collapsed in 07 and 08. And Met fans want to forget about that, but that was the prime of David Wright's career. That was right before, a couple of years after, where the Mets gave him that extension to be a lifelong Met. And it was a disaster contract. You can't do anything about the back. That happens. Not blaming David Wright for that. But we forget about that, right? We talk about how good David Wright is and was, but he was also a huge part of the collapse in 07 and 08. And that didn't bring a championship. There's a reason why Doc, Darryl, Hernandez are all retired numbers. You know why? Because they won. That's why. Keith Hernandez was a trade acquisition. He wasn't a lifelong Met, even though people seem like, oh, he's definitely always a Met, right? Doc and Darryl, right, because of unforeseen circumstances, Darryl wanted to go back home to LA. Doc was dealing with drugs. Never was going to been a career Met. Who knows if they ever would be if everything was good. And they didn't do that, and they might have had the career they might have had, maybe with the Mets. But they weren't long enough Mets, any three of those guys, to say they should be retired their numbers. But why were they? Because of a championship, right? I want to retire guys that actually brought something to the organization, not just individual awards. David Wright, as great as a Met he was, he has individual accolades with the organization. Same thing with Pete Alonso. Stop falling in love with the player. Love this team because they're winning for whoever is on this team. Because if the Mets get rid of Pete Alonso and the Mets win a World Series, you really think I care about what Pete Alonso does in the rest of his career? I don't, right? Root for the team on the front. Too many times now we're rooting for the name on the back of the jersey, and it's been so annoying. It went on with DeGrom, and it's now going on with Pete Alonso, and it's frustrating to me, Chris. It really is.
I hear you, man. I absolutely hear you. I don't really think that there's anything else to really say outside of that, to be honest with you. I mean, the situations are different, timelines are different, eras are different.
Sure.
But it makes sense. What you're saying does make sense. Going back to the point of Pete Alonso being that guy, again, I agree with Nelson in the chat. I mean, if he wants to be that guy, it's not going to be in a Mets uniform. And I think that he had every opportunity to be that guy in a Mets uniform. And I mean, he stepped up in 2022. He was the guy in 2019 at that point, but he's had other chances to be that guy, and he hasn't stepped up, to be honest with you. So again, it's not going to come in a Mets uniform. This is Lindor's team. It's also going to be Soto's team at the end of the day as well, at this point. And Pete Alonso is just going to have to take a step back if he wants to remain a New York Met. If that's something that he's not interested in doing, then I'm sure he's going to choose a different route. But again, at the end of the day, he controls his own destiny at the end of the day, right? He can say yes or no to any contract from any team. So we also have to realize that. And I agree with you is that we will see if offers are comparable from the Mets versus any other team. We'll see how badly he really wanted to be a Met. And that's where I'll leave it out off for right now. But in relation to what Stan is saying here, 22 and change AAV wise for a potential contract extension last off season versus $30 million per year for 3 years this off season. This AAV is subject to change, especially this late in negotiations. When you take down the years, right? We're talking about 7 years versus 3 years here. And back then too, I mean, the market was what it was, but we were having conversations about Alonso being compared to like a Matt Olson, and Matt Olson's getting what, 21-22 million dollars. So I do believe that the differences here do point to that $30 million being that sweet spot that the Mets are like, okay, listen, if we're going to have to go high AAV, it's going to be low years. You'll get your 30 million. We'll make you the highest paid first baseman, but it's really not going to be for the long term. So that's where I see that differential. I think that obviously naturally AAV goes down as the years go up. So I just want to address that comment.
Yeah, and you got to remember, when the Mets offered him that deal, the qualifying offer was around $18 million. So they were giving him, remember, they were buying out one more arbitration year as well. So that's why the price is a little bit more down in that contract. So you're buying out one arbitration year, and the qualifying offer was around $18.5 million. So you're giving them $2.5 to $3 million more of that qualifying offer. That's why we keep on saying it's a fair deal. He got the years. He was getting over $20 million a year. He was on point with the first baseman around the league where he's, compared to, not better than, but compared to, he was getting within that range. So that's why when we say it's a fair deal, it really was a fair deal. And he really believes that he can get $200 million. And if he does, go to San Francisco for it. I don't care. But you know what? Those right center field home runs that you used to hit, you damn sure ain't hitting them in San Francisco in that, Death Valley in right center field. And that go ahead. You know what? Go live and die in San Francisco, right? They've had great success over the last 15, 16 years, with 3 championships. But, who knows? I mean, we all could be eating our words, and Pete Alonso can have great years with San Francisco and have a championships before the Mets. And, we're like, oh, well, what are we going to do? Right? We'll eat our words. But at the end of the day, 2 fair offers. And until he realizes that those are fair offers, and maybe who knows if it's Boris, who knows if it's Pete Alonso, being butthurt because, he is not the guy here anymore. He's not the main guy. And, the love affair for Lindor last year probably really irked him, considering the fact that Lindor, Met fans finally realized how important Lindor was to this team and how he is the best shortstop in baseball. And I think it irks him. I think it's more of a factor. But we'll see. I think the Mets are going to keep that offer on the table. And Pete Alonso and Scott Boras already said it. Their last call is going to be to Steve Cohen. Either he matches another team's offer, which, by the way, I still think they might do. I think Steve Cohen might jump in last minute and be like, all right, let's stop this. All right, what are the Giants giving you? 5 years, 120? Yeah, all right, here you go. I think that's probably might be the case. I think Stearns is working this perfectly. And this is obviously Stearns 3 for 90 perfectly working for sure. I think if there's a team out there like the Giants, gives them 5-year deal for whatever type of money, I think Steve Cohen will pop in and be like, all right, we'll give it to you. Maybe Boris is hoping for that. And maybe, because you would think Cohen would step in here if he really wants Pete Alonso. If Pete Alonso ain't a Met, that means Steve Cohen didn't really want Pete Alonso as much as everybody thinks he might want Pete Alonso.
Exactly.
So we shall see. If Steve Cohen wants Alonso, it's going to happen, whatever the price tag is. And we'll see if that's the case. If Pete Alonso's not on this team and he doesn't take the deal that are on the table, and Steve Cohen doesn't step in, that shows a lot more than anything we talked about. All right, next topic. Bregman, Alex Bregman, Breadman, A-Breg, whatever you want to call him. I still think he's going to be a New York Met. Nothing we've heard has put any doubt in my mind that Bregman's going to be a Met. It's a David Stearns player perfectly. Run prevention, great defensive player. He's the guy that hits the all fields when he's not hitting for power. When he hits for power, he pulls the ball a lot more. But when he needs to get that base hit, when he needs to, hit the ball to the right side, he can do that. Maybe not center, right field for home runs. But you know what? When he needs to turn on a ball, he turns on the ball to hit a home run. You can hit balls down the line at Citi Field and get the ball out. But he's a guy that sprays the ball on all fields when it comes to, putting the ball in play. He's very good in doing that. And it's a perfect scenario for David Stearns here, especially if you don't get Alonzo, you can pivot. And I don't think Bregman and Alonzo come hand in hand. I think the Mets can do both. I don't think they want to wait for Pete Alonso to make his decision. I think Bregman's going to be a New York Met, and what that does, it puts even more pressure on Pete Alonso to take a deal for the New York Mets or come back, because the Mets really don't have any pressure at that point because they can move Vientos to first base if they have to. Put Bregman at third base. You solidify your lineup, you solidify your defense, and you're like, all right, well, that's it. Sorry, Pete. And if you do come back, Vientos is your DH, so it's the best of both worlds for the New York Mets. What are you thinking when it comes to Pete Alonso, if it's a factor with Bregman, but your true thoughts on Alex Bregman becoming a New York Met? I'm sorry I put first base there for Bregman and third base. You guys know what I mean. Yeah, Chris, I'm sorry.
It's late. It's late. We forgive you.
It really is.
Listen, I think that especially with the recent news surrounding Pete Alonso, I think that Bregman, not like highly likely, but I can see it happening situationally for sure. This is why it would be so perfect if Pete Alonso would just take a short-term deal, right? And just stop asking for a long-term deal, because then you can get both, and you can give Bregman that long-term deal, probably around 6 years is what I would probably guess for Alex Bregman. Another guy that wants 175 to $200 million, right? Can't do that for both. If you're the New York Mets. But you know what? In all seriousness, now, I think I've said this many times. If it's Pete Alonso or Alex Bregman, I still have to go Pete Alonso, man.
I agree.
Situationally for the lineup, I'm not really keen on driving this point home of like Vientos needing to stay at third base, because I'm fine moving Vientos to first. I'm fine moving Vientos to DH. He doesn't need to stay at third base, but I know a lot of Mets fans would like to see him stay at third base. So
Sure.
just for that point alone, bring back Alonso. I do think that this conversation has everything to do with the next topic in the starting pitching market. Given the payroll right now, the New York Mets are probably, I think, with all allocations remaining consistent, they're at just under $240 million in terms of the payroll. So you're working with about, let's say, $50 to $60 million. It depends on that luxury tax threshold, but let's just say it's $50 to $60 million, somewhere within that range. If the Mets are out on a guy like Luis Castillo, which would take up $22 to $24 million of that $50 to $60 million left, then, and if they're out on a guy like, let's say, Roki Sasaki is completely separate. That's a different discussion because of the IFA money. Any other guy like Pablo Lopez, I've mentioned many of times on our streams and in my videos on my channel, he would take up $20+ million. If they are out on any pitcher not named Roki Sasaki, there's an opportunity to get both guys. And that's something that we did, we're kind of combining with this Alonso and Bregman talk. But, I take a look at the differences between these two players. Obviously, Bregman strikes out a whole lot less. The strikeout rate has been going up for him over the past 3 years, but he strikes out probably at a 10% less clip than Pete Alonso, which is a huge difference. So you're talking about certain situations that actually matter. Clutch numbers, runners in scoring position. I told you Alex Bregman last year wasn't really great with runners in scoring position. He was actually worse than Pete Alonso. But again, we have to assume that if the Mets are going to give him a long-term deal, maybe that's just a one-off year for Alex Bregman in his career. So at this point, I think it's likely, especially if the Alonso talks stall, and then you can pivot to a guy like, Kike Hernandez, or you can pivot if the Mets are
Sure.
going to go that big. Listen, if we're talking Alonso and Bregman at this point, why can't we talk Santander and Bregman? You know what I
Well,
mean?
well, that's what I'm
It-
saying. Like the
yeah.
Mets have an option here, and that's why when I think they would go 4 years, maybe 5 years with Anthony Santander. I think they would go 4 years with Santander. I think he just fits the mold. And we keep up getting the David Stearns player mold, right? What he likes. He likes versatility. Pete Alonso does not provide that. He is an average first baseman who, yeah, can be a DH, but he doesn't like to play DH at all. He's been well known in saying that, even though he has great numbers as a DH. Pete Alonso doesn't want a DH. So that kind of hinders the Mets. The Mets are not going to put Pete Alonso at DH. They just don't like to. They would like to do it, but Pete Alonso doesn't like to do it. Santander, Bregman. I don't even think I think you can platoon all these. You can move these guys around. You can play Vientos at third base one day, take Bregman off his feet, put him at DH. Santander, the same thing. Put him at first, put him in right, put him in center, put him at DH. You can do a lot of things with those guys. Stearns likes everyday players that can play multiple positions. He likes versatility. These guys have run prevention, stats that he really loves, right? And they still provide the offense that Pete Alonso provides. Yeah, Pete Alonso can do it on his own, but when you bring in Bregman with his 26 to 27 home runs, you bring in Santander. I don't think he's going to hit 40 again, but say he hits 28, 29. That is nearly 60 home runs between two players that lightens out your lineup. One guy that hits 40 home runs in the lineup doesn't lighten out your lineup at all. It keeps it where it's at. It's an extra bat if you bring in just Alonso with Soto, but if you bring in Bregman, Santander, or even Bregman, Alonso for that matter, it stretches out the lineup. And that's what people are forgetting. People are like, how are you gonna, add the home runs or the RBIs that Pete Alonso provides? Easy. If Santander and Bregman hit 25 apiece, hit 85 home runs, 85 RBIs apiece, that's 50 home runs, 160 RBIs between two players. That's not even talking about Nimmo, Lindor, Vientos, Alvarez. All these guys that we've been talking about, and Soto. That adds to it. And we're talking about having a 1-7, even if that's not Alonso, even if it is Bregman and Santander, it lengthens the lineup, and you still get the offensive production that Pete Alonso provides, but you're getting the production still, but you're also lengthening the lineup. Nope, we're not talking. They're not talking. Met fans are not talking about that enough. Pete Alonso clearly helps. Pete Alonso, Juan Soto in the lineup, great. You're gonna probably get 40 home runs for Pete Alonso. You hope you get 40 home runs for Pete Alonso. Yeah, you're gonna get that offense. But getting those two guys in Santander and Bregman, you're just lengthening the lineup and still getting that one production you're getting from one player in two, and it just makes the lineup a lot harder to go through. And that's fun to think about, Chris. That's a lot of fun to think about. And you know what? If it's Bregman and Anthony Santander, Met fans will be pissed because of Pete Alonso. I'd be really happy if that's the case. Soto, Santander, Bregman, with the guys already in this lineup, it's going to be a very fun lineup and a very productive offense in 2025.
Oh yeah, I mean, this goes back to the conversation of the Mets being able to put together a fantastic lineup out there in 2025. Um, Dominoes have to fall in the right place, but even without Pete Alonso, the Mets are able to do so, right? I still think, again, as we just mentioned with the actual payroll allocations, that this and if we're not talking about or, we're talking about and, whether it's Santander and Bregman or Bregman and Alonso, you don't really have room for that premier pitcher that we've been talking about in every single one of our streams, right? It's just simply not doable at that point. Unless the Mets run it with like a $315 million payroll, which is what they were at last season, but that was with dead money involved, which is around 80 to $85 million. That's just simply not achievable. It's not even for Steve Cohen going into this 2025 season having that type of payroll. There'd be nobody that's sporting that kind of payroll. So yeah, I think that if the Mets are content with this rotation, again, it's going to be a rotation by committee. You have a Kodai Senga that's coming back healthy. I know, Rob, we've talked about this many of times, and we'll continue to talk about the starting pitching market here in the next topic. But if the Mets are truly done adding starting pitchers, and they're going to wait to assess that with how the rotation does in the first half and just go after a pitcher maybe at the deadline, which is going to cost you more prospects, right? So why not just do it now, like we've been saying? But oh well, if that's the route they choose, then yeah, you need to have a lineup, a solidified lineup that's on par with a team like the Phillies, the Dodgers, the Braves. You need it. And it's going to take two names. It's not just going to be Alonzo. It's going to take two names, Alonzo and Bregman or Santander. And that's what it's going to have to take. So yeah, no, I completely agree with you. Somewhere lurking in this conversation is definitely Jesse Winker. Jesse Winker, I think you need a lefty off the bench because right now, right now you have a bench full of righties. And this is kind of where I get a little bit shaky in terms of the Jose Iglesias conversation, because that's simply going to be reliant. I know that I've had a lot of people ask me about Jose Iglesias. That's simply reliant on the Mets' comfortability with Luis Angel Acuna. It's going to be Luis Angel Acuna or Jose Iglesias. There's no room for both of these guys at the end of your bench. But again, we're talking about the big names in your lineup, middle of the order type of bats. Man, listen, you ask me, the best situation, yes, it's doable to have a fantastic lineup, like the best lineup you can throw out there if you're the New York Mets without Alonso. But I'll tell you what, Alonso and Bregman would look pretty damn good. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. And you know, we're okay with any combination. Bregman, Santander, you know, Bregman, Alonzo, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't think Santander, Alonzo makes much sense. It doesn't fit because there's too many weird. I mean, it's possible that can happen, but I think Bregman, Alonzo, or Bregman, Anthony Santander, and it's funny how both of them involve Bregman in this scenario, because I think Bregman's going to happen. I know people keep on talking about the Tigers. I'll believe it when I see it. It's not like the Tigers spent money here, right? They spent a 1-year deal on Gleyber Torres. You know, I know they spent it on Baez, but we'll see. You know, he might go to Detroit, but again, after the Astros kind of went a different route, why weren't the Tigers all over Bregman? Like, it seemed like, you know, it's a possibility that Bregman doesn't want to go to Detroit. You know, we forget that point as well, that players, you know, we saw Burns turn down $250 million to play in San Francisco or even Toronto to go to Arizona for less, because that's where he lives with his family. So, and I still, you know what, I'm kind of thinking that the reason why the Yankees pivoted to Max Fried and the Mets were never in on him, maybe Burns never wanted to come to New York. I wonder if that's a factor.
Yeah, that's.
I was always like shocked that the Yankees went Max Fried over Corbin Burns, especially when they saw Corbin Burns basically dominate them. Because I think Corbin Burns is a better pitcher than Max Fried by a little, not a lot, but I think Burns is a better pitcher. So I do wonder if he just didn't want to come to New York, in my opinion, because, you know, he is a West Coast guy. His family is in Arizona. So I do wonder if that's the case. But yeah, I kind of think that when all said and done, Bregman's on this team, either with Santander or Pete Alonso. And you know what? I think the Mets have to have a lineup suitable for the teams they're going to be facing, the Dodgers, the Braves, the Phillies, like you said, Chris, you know, the Padres for that matter. You know, there's a lot of really good offensive teams. And if the Mets are going to be, you know, a juggernaut offensively and score 6.5 runs per game, you know, that kind of helps with the rotation not being, you know, top of Major League Baseball, even in the National League. You know, I'm not very confident in that. And I still think they're going to trade for a starting pitcher somehow, some way. But if the rotation sits here like it's sitting here in this shrinking starting pitching market, you have to go hard and go heavy offensively because you're not going to win games. I don't care what anybody says. Manaea isn't good enough, and you can't expect Senga to be, 2022 or 2023 Senga, or, have David Peterson be this guy that we saw last year. There's too many ifs. There's a lot of ifs and hope that has to happen to actually, have a good rotation. Even though I think this rotation could be pretty good, but not the level that I thought the Mets could have gone this year, Chris. And do you think the Mets are done with this pitching rotation? Because unless Sasaki chooses us, I would be shocked if they don't make a trade for a starting pitcher. I'm kind of losing hope in that, but I'm hoping still. But what are your thoughts on this shrinking market with the Mets for starting pitching?
Again, the Mets operate in a unique way where you don't know what they're going to do until they do it, or until something's reported about it after the signing actually happened, such as was the case with Teoscar Hernandez, that 2-year deal that they had on the table for him. I think they need another pitcher, obviously. I think that we can both agree that this rotation as it currently stands, when we talk about quality or quantity, the way that the rotation is set up right now, the 6-man rotation and the names that you have 7 or 8 different pitchers that are capable of being a long man out of their bullpen or a starting pitcher. I got to use the word quantity, right? I got to use the word quantity. And I hate to do that, but that's what it is right now until inevitably the projects of this rotation prove us wrong, just like Severino did, just like Manaea did, and they work out. But right now, going into the season, all things consistent, you got to use the word quantity. And if that's the case, you have to go all out on your offense and upgrade the lineup, like we just stated. I'd like to think that the Mets are still in on another pitcher. Sasaki, I hope they're not holding out hope for him, because that's a true wild card. At this point, if you are wanting another pitcher and you're putting all your eggs in one basket in Sasaki and just hoping that he chooses the Mets, that's a dangerous game to play. There's multiple names around this league that could make the Mets rotation better. But again, giving up the assets and taking on that payroll money, how much better is a Mets rotation with Pablo Lopez in it than without it, right? Same thing with Luis Castillo. This is like, and there's stuff that can quantify this, right? In terms of actual equations that David Stearns and this Mets front office are probably, putting up there. This is quantifiable. We can't quantify it because I don't have the math right in front of me, but it's quantifiable. But this also goes to show, right, how confident are the Mets in Kodai Senga? How confident are they in his health and his ability to pitch over the course of 162 and his performance? So there's a lot of factors here. You know what, Rob? Maybe like a week and a half ago, I was kind of confident the Mets were going to go after another pitcher via trade. I'm starting to lose a little bit of hope in that.
Yeah,
I'm not
it
gonna
feels
lie.
like it, right?
I'm starting to lose a little bit hope. And yes, Pablo Lopez, like, listen, these teams like the Twins, a team like the Diamondbacks right now, they don't need to move guys per se. They don't need to move any arms. Same thing with the Padres. But they're always going to listen. And same thing with the Marlins with Alcantara, right? They're always going to listen in on offers. So they're probably going to need to be wowed by an offer in terms of the prospect capital going back in return, but these guys are available. If the Mets really wanted to make a move, I think the likeliest guy still is Luis Castillo, with what we just talked about with the Mariners payroll and needing to add another bat, and where they're at historically with their payroll right now being $5 million under what they were last year. But yeah, man, until we hear solidified news, which we haven't on the starting pitching front, I gotta believe the Mets may be done with the starting pitching, which is a shame, because I think it's a big gamble and a big risk. And at the end of the day, if you're gonna assess the first half, right? If you're gonna assess how Clay Holmes does in the first half, if you're gonna assess a guy like Griffin Canning to see if he can make meaningful contributions for you throughout the course of 162, it's just a dangerous game to play. And if you have championship caliber aspirations alongside the Dodgers, That's just not something that I'm comfortable with, man. Not at all.
Yeah, and I'm not comfortable with it. I said it. I don't care if you get Bregman, Alonzo, Soto, and if the Mets are done with this rotation and that's what they're using, what we have currently, I'm not giving them an A. I'm sorry. I like the lineup, but again, why go that far with the lineup and still have an average rotation that you hope two guys step up? You hope Minaya has a year like last year. You hope Senga pitches like he does in 2023. You hope Montez bounces back with the lab, or David Peterson shows what he did when he came back from injury. That's too much hope. And I still think you're leading to a point where at the trade deadline, you're going to need a starting pitcher, probably a big name starting pitcher at the trade deadline. You're going to have to trade and take up assets anyway to get him. So why not do it now? And again, the offseason is still the offseason. The guys that are still out there, people in the chat talking about Jordan Montgomery, since they signed Corbin Burns. I know the owner talked about, it was a bad deal with Jordan Montgomery. I don't see signing Corbin Burns and getting rid of Jordan Montgomery when you have Zach Gallen for one more year. They're clearly trying to go for, remember, they choked away a playoff spot, right? That was one of the reasons why the Mets got into the playoffs, because the Diamondbacks choked.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see them trading any of their pitchers unless they get blown away with a deal. It doesn't make sense. They have one of the better pitching staffs in baseball right now, considering the fact of what they have currently in their rotation. They're going to go for it. This is their last year with Zach Gallen. They're probably not going to re-sign Zach Gallen. Maybe the Mets are looking at that. When Zach Gallen's a free agent after this year, maybe they're like, maybe we can trade for him at the deadline if Diamondbacks are bad, or, I still think the Mets are going to trade for a starting pitcher. Like, maybe it might not be Luis Castillo. Maybe it might be Jordan Montgomery. Maybe it's a caliber pitcher like a Jordan Montgomery. That's probably a number 2, possibly a 3, something like that. But somebody that has the upside, maybe they do it that way. But until all these guys are off the board, or it's been said that these guys are not going to be traded, I just don't see a world where the Mets rotation is this. Because if you're a Mets fan and you're going to give me the bullshit that this rotation is going to do damage until it actually is proven to do so, you're nuts. You're absolutely nuts. Especially in a year where your organization, our organization, said from the owner to the GM, 2025 is the year where they're going for it. You can't spill that out and say that and give me a rotation where Minaya is probably your best pitcher in your rotation, right? I hope to God Minaya pitches like he did last year. But is there any Mets fan that feels confident that that's actually possible? To the same caliber. This is with a year in the books where more teams will see him. More teams have a book on him. Not saying that Minaya still can't be really good, but being what he was last year, that is a little scary in my play, because if Minaya isn't as good as last year, now you have to rely on your other guys. Kodai Senga being healthy and pitching well, by the way. That's 2 things. Who's your number 3? Chris, do you know who's our number 3? Because I can't even tell you who's a number 1, let alone a number 3. Is it going to be Peterson? Can it be Montez? Is it going to be Blackburn when he comes back? Like, what the hell? Is Griffin Cannon going to be a part of this rotation? Like, you can't have a 6-man rotation and have a bunch of garbage at the back end of the rotation and tell me that you're satisfied with an offseason.
It's quantity. That's what it is. It's just quantity.
It's tough, man. Absolutely tough. Spend the money, damn it. Sorry. All right. I just
not even the money, Rob. It's not even about the money. It's about the prospect capital, right? In a trade at this point.
Prospect
capital.
That's why I don't trust David Stearns. When it comes to that, it's like, you got the assets. We know the logjam we have in the middle infield. At some point, you got to use them. And again, until he does, there has not been a Mets GM. This organization hasn't done it. They did it with Cespedes, which was their top pitching prospect for Cespedes. They don't trade their prospects in the offseason or at the deadline for the pitcher they need. It seems like it's always a pitcher. They just don't do it, and I just don't understand it. when it's easy. And then I'm like, okay, well, there's more than enough guys you can pay this offseason that you can get to put at the top end of the rotation, and they don't even spend on it. So, like, I don't know how they work in both worlds where it's either, hey, spend the money on a pitcher and overpay, or just trade for a pitcher. You don't do both. And quantities, it sounds like a great idea, and the Mets got very lucky last year. Now, maybe the lab is something to really talk about, but it's been 1 year. Let's see them do it again. If they do it again, I'll shut my mouth.
Yeah.
I won't, but it's been 1 year. It hasn't been proven when it's only been 1 year. If it's a second year and you see Montas pitch to 2 years ago before he was traded to the Yankees, where he was pitching to a 3.2 ERA in Oakland, and somebody else steps up, then the lab doesn't mean much to me until it actually do it a second year. But I still have hope for a trade. And until that happens, I'm hoping for the best.
If they're able to fix Griffin Canning, and Griffin Canning pitches to anything below a 4 ERA, I will shut my mouth in the next offseason
Yeah.
and just forget an ace. Let's give me all the reclamation projects. But again, I agree with you. 1 year sample size is a little bit tough for me to buy into at this point. Particularly when you know that if you're in the position where we all expect the Mets to be at the deadline, you're gonna need to pay presumably even more, right, in prospect capital if there's a bidding war for whichever guy that you like. And that kind of brings me to a question that I have, because I'm just trying to wonder. We just talked about Arizona and potentially dealing Zach Gallen last year of his deal. Their payroll is also, I believe, at the highest it's ever been at this point. I think historically ever with this Corbin Burns signing. Do they offload a guy like Zach Gallen? Do they try to
They might.
offload a guy like Eduardo Rodriguez, who's got 3 years left on his deal? He's owed around $20 million per over the next 3 years. It could make sense. And then also, what do the San Diego Padres do? I mean, if they're really trying to take a step back too, and if anybody's available over there, they're going to get rid of Dylan Cease. I don't see the Mets and the Padres striking a deal together, right? I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
But some of these popular names, right? These ace type guys like Gallen is. I know that he's had a little bit of a down year, but he is at his best an ace. Same thing with Alcantara. Same thing with Cease. I mean, these guys, are they really going to get moved? And is it going to be this offseason or at the deadline? Because that's a game changer at that point.
Yeah.
I have one more question for you before I'm assuming we're going to wrap things up here at some point, but what's the percentage? Because Mets fans can't stop talking about Vladdy. They can't stop. And you know what? At this point, with the whole Pete Alonso situation, why should anyone stop talking about Vladdy? It kind of annoys me.
It does.
It kind of annoys me a little bit. Sorry, I thought my mic was cutting out. It kind of annoys me a little bit, but at this point, you have to talk about it with the situation that's going on. There was rumors. I'm not sure if it's actual speculation or not that he declined an initial offer that they had for him. But again, what is the percentage that you would put that he has moved this offseason? What do you think?
I think it's low. I mean, Toronto's striking out on all the free agents that they're trying to get. Soto, Burns, everybody basically. They're not going to get Pete Alonso, even if they want to trade Vladimir Guerrero. I don't think he's going to go there. So it's like, I think it's a possibility, but at the deadline. I don't think it's in the offseason. So, for the hopes for him getting moved, I would be shocked with that. And again, if Stearns is not willing to give up prospects for guys that are under control, pitching or bat, then why would he do it for Vlad Guerrero, who's going to be a free agent? If that's the case. But I know that wasn't your direct question, and obviously it was related to the Mets. And I think it is a big reason why the Mets are kind of playing this game with Pete Alonso here, a smart game with Pete Alonso, because I think they are in the back of their mind thinking about Vladimir Guerrero. Why the hell not? Why wouldn't you? You wouldn't be doing your job if you weren't thinking about it. But trading Vlad Guerrero this offseason, I think it's very hard, especially because how many teams are going to be after Vladimir Guerrero? Look at all the teams that already signed 1-year deals, 3-year deals, short-term deals with first basemen. How are you going to trade for him when you just gave $12 million for Goldschmidt for 1 year? When there's no guarantee that Vladimir Guerrero is going to sign an extension. So I think, in the Mets case, they can do it right now if they're willing to give up prospects. I'm still on the the line where I don't think they will, which is annoying, but I would give it about a 25.
They will take Brett Beatty. They will take Brett Beatty, and they will like it. That's what we should say.
Yeah, thank you. But yeah, I think there's like a 25% chance that I know that might be high, to be honest, but I think 25% only because I think they have to get blown away with an offer, and or he turns down another offer that they try to give him, and maybe they're like, screw this, we're not getting anybody in free agency. Vlad, you know what? Go have fun somewhere else. Let's get some prospects in here. Let's see if we can, fix this whole mess with prospects over the next couple of years and rebuild, because they're going to rebuild. Like if they don't re-sign Vladimir Guerrero Jr., which I don't think Vlad's going to sign there, to be quite honest with you, because nobody wants to come to Toronto to help him out. So why would he sign there? It really doesn't make sense. So yeah, I say 25% chance. I think it's more than a 75% chance he gets traded at the deadline if the Blue Jays don't get more help for him, and it doesn't look like they are. So that's where I think they are right now.
You know what I'll say exactly with what you just said, Rob, why it's so smart for Pete Alonso to just go back onto the market next offseason is that you get all the scraps of the market of what of what Vladdy leaves behind. You know what I mean? Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is going to get more money. Age is a factor. Production's obviously a whole different thing between these two guys as well. He's going to get that premier money. There's one team that can sign him that's in on a first baseman, and all the rest of the teams that need a first baseman, presumably for the long term, with Pete Alonso turning 31 next year, it makes total sense. I mean, you're talking about maybe even the Yankees, who, if they strike out on Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and they have Goldschmidt on a 1-year deal, maybe they re-enter that realm of thinking of going after Pete Alonso, which I'm so very shocked that they decided to pass up on this year. So it just makes total sense for Pete Alonso and his long-term valuations of wanting a long-term deal. But I don't know, man. I mean, Boris and him got another plan. So I don't know what's going on with that. But all right, let's do the rapid fire time.
Yes, sir. All right. So my question for you is just similar to just this team as a whole, right? If we do get the bats that we talked about, whatever combination, I think any combination that we talked about are perfectly fine, right? If it is only Alonzo with Juan Soto, I think it's fine. I think Bregman, Alonzo, Santander, and Bregman, whatever it might be. And the rotation is what it is, but you get a combination of those guys. Are you satisfied with an offseason that involves a combination of Soto, Alonzo, or any combination you could think of, that two guys are going to be two bats are in the lineup: Soto, Alonzo, Bregman, Alonzo, Bregman, Santander? Would you be okay with the rotation that it currently is right now and the lineup, and saying the Mets had a good offseason, and your season preview, let's talk about that for a second, is going to have a number that is confidently a playoff team? So there's like 4 questions in there, but would you consider it a good offseason, and your season preview and your number of total wins obviously is evidence of that? I guess that's what I'm asking. Oh, you're on mute, buddy. Sorry. Again.
No, I'm sorry. It's getting late. I'm forgetting to unmute myself. If the rotation remains as is right now, no other additions, if the Mets go and get Bregman and Alonzo, I'm talking and, not or, and Alonzo, right? That's probably my number one option. I'd say that over a Bregman and Santander, is Bregman and Alonzo. If they do that, I'm satisfied. I don't care.
Okay.
Whatever the rotation is, I don't care. I'm going into 2025 confident, and I know that the rotation that they have right now can hold water, their heads above the water, and make it to the deadline to grab that arm that they need. Because the offense at that point, on paper, we're assuming a lot of things in terms of Bregman and Alonzo 2024 being an off year for them, but that lineup on paper is on par with the Dodgers. I mean, I'm sorry. You
It
add
really
those two
is.
guys with Juan Soto, it's on par with the Dodgers. Yeah, sure, I'll give the Dodgers a little bit of an edge still, but it's on par with the Dodgers, especially when you're talking about a deep 1 through 7. So yeah, if the rotation remains consistent, we're talking about and not or with the lineup. Get me Bregman and Alonzo. I'm still satisfied.
Yeah,
100%.
I'm on board with you. Even though I probably wouldn't give him an A, I'd be very, very confident in saying this lineup's gonna win a lot more games than it would lose. I think what was the problem with the lineup when it went completely dead, when you could only count on 2 or 3 guys. Now you can count on 6 guys to all have bad early seasons is very rare. And I think that that's where the Mets can really fall into a good situation with that type of lineup. All right, Chris, what question you got for me for rapid fire?
I was just gonna ask you because we haven't talked bullpen at all. Like we haven't talked any bullpen. The bullpen market's been kind of stagnant. Like, yeah, we've seen some moves here and there, but of the guys still remaining, who was the first guy around the league, not just with the Mets, who do you think is the first guy that falls? Whether it's Minter, Tanner Scott, I mean David Robertson's still out there. I'll consider him kind of a top name because he produced a really good season last season. I know the age is not appealing, but the numbers were good. Who's the first reliever that falls, and who do you think the Mets actually prioritize when the reliever market comes around?
I would say probably Tanner Scott falls off the board. I think the big name's going to go. I think the bullpen market is kind of what it is, and I think the big name has to fall off the board. Unlike the position players and the starting pitchers, where it just seemed like it went all over the place, where the smaller guys are signing first over the big guys, and the position players after Soto, it seemed like it's just weirdly happening where you think it would be a trickle down effect with Santander and other guys. I think Tanner Scott's coming off the board. Again, would I love Tanner Scott in New York Mets? Sure. I don't think the Mets are doing it. I don't think they're going to play closer money for an 8th inning guy. I'm just not doing it, especially when you have the prospects of Clay Holmes potentially being in the bullpen, which I still believe is going to happen, by the way. I think Tanner Scott, but I wouldn't be shocked if it's like a Robinson or a Minter, a guy that's probably going to get a 1-year deal. That's probably going to come off the board, a couple of those guys. So I would say Scott first, and then a couple of those 1-year deal type of guys like the Robinsons, like the Staniks, like the Minters of the world that will come off after that. And I hope the Mets will get at least one, because we do forget that the Mets are starting out with a pretty decent bullpen, name-wise, right? Buto, Nunez, you got Garrett, you got Diaz. That's 4 guys already that I think a lot of Met fans are pretty happy with. And I think Budo is going to be in the rotation. I mean, in the bullpen, even though the rotation is not, what I think it should be. But I think the Mets just need 2 arms. I think you can go any route. I think they need a lefty. I hate having bullpens with no lefties. I love 2, but I can deal with 1. I think you need a solid lefty, and give me any right-hander that is above average. A Stanek who can be elite if he's on. Right? If he's walking guys, he has trouble. And he's a little wild. But give me another right-hander that I can trust in the 6th inning, maybe the 7th. And I think the bullpen will be fine. And I think the bullpen could work well with the rotation that might be a little bit above average. I think it can work. And I think the problem last year was the Mets had solid rotation, and the bullpen was just all over the place, and it didn't help the situation. I think if you have a solid bullpen, I think a good bullpen, and above average rotation, I think it works well together, along with the offense that we're talking about going into the season. So I say Tanner Scott comes on off the board first.
That question was kind of weak, so my last question to you, the final question, I apologize, everybody. One team where you think Roki Sasaki is signing, if you had to just do a very early guess, where do you think he's going?
Oh, easy, New York Mets. I got to put it in the atmosphere a little bit. I got to put it in the atmosphere a little bit. I don't believe it. But you know what? the way the Mets are going, they must have more confidence than any of us, because they're going about this with, I think, with a lot of confidence that Sasaki, that rumor, that story came out with, Jeremy Hefner and their pitching, amazing pitching status, or whatever accolades that everybody believes they have, and Met fans clearly don't see that. But it came out, the agent of Sasaki said it, that he was very interested in it. It was in a couple of articles that Jeremy Hefner was brought up in the Sasaki talks, and what he likes, what he wants to go to in a comfortable environment where he sees pitchers getting better. That was talked about from the agent as well. So maybe the Mets have a lot more confidence. Maybe the meeting went great. I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't believe in it, but I'm gonna put it in the atmosphere. Sasaki to the Mets. You know why? Because why the hell not? We got Soto, right? Some of us didn't even think it was possible. So maybe we'll get lucky and we get Sasaki, and then I can shut my mouth about the rotation.
I would love to see it happen. I'm still very skeptical. I'm now holding out hope for Roki Sasaki to the Mets, but again, stranger things have happened. I think Baseball America has the Mets ranked the 4th potential landing spot. I don't know what they have the team that I think is going to go to, but I'm just going to say the San Francisco Giants. I think that makes sense for him. And you know what? I mean, hopefully he just doesn't follow his friends, and hopefully he wants to create a name for himself, right? And be a guy on a different team. But I think it's going to be the West Coast. I mean, you can say the Padres as well, but I'm going to say the Giants. And that's literally nothing backing that. There's nothing backing that. The fit makes sense to me. So I'll say the Giants finally get their guy.
I didn't even have that on my mind, but that's a good one.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's it for me, man. That's the discussion. I enjoyed this.
The first, probably not many, but the first Mets Midnight Talk of the offseason of the channel. So it was fun. It was interesting. I mean, we had a great viewership in the middle of the night, of course. And of course, the one stream that we have that is overnight, nobody freaking signs with the New York Mets, So there you go. So with that said, guys, thank you for tuning in to the Midnight Show, the Mets Talk, right here with the Hot Stove crew. And of course, the Hot Stove is going to continue throughout the off season. But thank you for tuning in tonight, guys. Get some rest, and hopefully we don't wake up to news after our stream of the Mets signing somebody. Have a great night, guys. Let's go Mets, and we'll see you next time. Have a great night, guys.
Go Mets.
City lights in the dead of night, full of echo.